Hi guys, and welcome to today's lesson. So we're going to go doing another digital sketch, working on Procreate on an iPad, but from a reference which is classical. So we're looking at trying to sort of copy classical tones, and also, in this particular case, the kind of looseness of the sketch. So what I want to do is I'm going to start with picking a colour which is close to the kind of background, raw kind of yellow wash colour. I'm just been using a round brush. We're going to be kind of same as the previous lesson, just blocking in using big shapes, because that's something that you can do when you're working with digital, because you can sort of make adjustments without it's non-destructive. So you can see I'm just making a slightly deeper yellow, and I'm trying to mix my colour myself, so not necessarily eyedropping the colours immediately from the painting. So that's not too bad. I want to get now this kind of browny, dark grey browny colour, the sort of burnt umber. Get that sort of... Oh, actually, we won't do that first. Let's do the darker yellow colour. And I don't tend to, with these sorts of things, maybe slightly more kind of green tint, I think, to the yellow. Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah, I don't tend to kind of backtrack at all, so I don't use sort of undo that much as a tool. I like to just kind of work over and over, just because the idea with these is that you are sort of creating a painting. And so if you say you were painting, you wouldn't obviously, you may be able to wipe back, but you wouldn't be able to sort of completely go back and revise everything you did in the way that undo can sort of work with a... So I'm sort of gradually building up the kind of textures we see behind. A lot of this is going to be laid back over. Not necessarily doing it with textured brushes. As you could. Just because I kind of like to sort of start it at least with the sort of feel of the digital brushes. And you can, even with these sorts of brushes, you do eventually sort of get to a point where it feels more traditional. So let's start to get some of these more orangey smears. And I can pick up my sort of smudge tool with a sort of stucco look to it, and just use that to sort of start to pull some of these textures around, sort of scratchy them a little bit. And back to brushing it in. Then we'll go back to that deeper brown colour that I was using. That's not too bad. Then back to that smudge tool and just sort of use that to kind of smear and then I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, sort of use this to just suggest the that's not too bad. And then I'm going to get a slightly darker brown, a little bit grayer. Oh, bigger brush, back to a bigger brush. And whoops. Get some suggestion of her hair in. And then skip to a more kind of pinky tone, this kind of more grey pinky tone, and start to establish where her face is roughly going to sit. So if I zoom right out, you see sort of starting to get the feel of the particular colors. So maybe just sort of swing that head across a little bit. More of a dark kind of pinky color. Just starting to establish a sense of the face in shadow. Maybe a bit of a darker note, a bit warmer. So just want to start to establish the kind of slightly deeper hue of her lip color. I'm not 100% on the exact placement of the features. They'll definitely change. Partly we're partly building shapes out at this stage, but also figuring out colors. So it's not just sort of getting the shape super accurate. That we can kind of tweak later. Maybe go a bit more yellow, but yeah, it's a bit more yellow with this color. And pull that lighter color forward a bit. So this is more of a shape shift. Across the cheek. So The one sort of last thing, we're getting kind of nearing the point where I would say I can stop for today, because I'm sort of happy with the direction that we're going with figuring out these colours. But one last thing I want to do is just establish a little bit more specifically the placement of these irises. It's something that I always consider fairly useful to do fairly early on in the painting. It's not going to be at all perfect, but it just kind of gives us a starting point. And then when we jump back in the next session, we can sort of go from there with it. So I wanted to just get some of these colours, these quite specific reds. Yeah, so those little kind of introductions of some of those little details into the eye definitely help. And as I say, at this stage I don't necessarily feel like I need a ton more. I need to add loads more. This is sort of getting to a good point to stop. So maybe just get a bit of a darker brown grey, slightly bigger brush. Just sort of establish where the top of the head's going to go. That curl on the left-hand side of the face. So yeah, that's looking not too bad. Maybe just go a touch pinker down the nose. Pull the bridge of the nose out a little bit. Maybe just a little bit of a highlight sort of shape. The nose there and there. Starting to sort of establish a little bit of structure. Slightly darker. Cooler colour around the cheek and chin. And then the last thing I'll do is just get a suggestion of this more florid sort of colour. Slightly rougey sort of cheeks. Yeah, and that's looking pretty good as a sort of starting point. So it's very kind of like roughed in. Obviously it's not entirely accurate, the kind of proportions, But it gives us a starting point, so next week we'll be able to jump in and start to kind of refine these shapes and get it really working nicely. But yeah, that's it as a start. You can see sort of like trying to give a little bit of a sense of the texture. I could probably use a slightly smaller smudgy brush and just kind of work that a little bit into the blendings here and there. Yeah, so that little smudginess sort of helps just sort of start to build the texture a bit. But yeah, so you see this sort of gives us our starting point, and then next time when we come back to it, we'll tweak things around, do a few more sessions just like we did on the previous one, and kind of get close to this general feel that we get from the painting. But definitely a nice painting to work from, the painterliness, and trying to translate that is a good challenge. So I think there'll probably be a week gap because we're at midterm, so there'll be a couple of weeks before the next one, but we'll be continuing this series. In the meantime, you can go back and watch the previous portrait painting demo, digital portrait painting demo, which is the previous playlist, and set of videos before this one, and sort of see how that one went and compare it as this one progresses. So yeah, that's it for today. As always, subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with lessons from myself and other tutors and students from the school, videos about work from the school. And you can also click the link in the description to visit the website and see the sorts of paid qualifications that the school offers. But yeah, that's it for today, and I'll see you guys soon.